Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I am your host, Mark. This episode of Side Projects sees the return of Steve Dawson and Mark Mallman. They join me to discuss song structure. We go over some basic terms and structures that are typical and atypical. We talk about songs like The Wreck of the Edmunds Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot, Don't Stop Believin by Journey, Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, and a bunch of others. Is a successful song necessarily a good song? Are streaming services, algorithms, and metrics changing pop song structures? Does the music delivery system, like records, CDs, or in streaming, play a part in the song structure that's popular within that system? Steve studies the structure of a Taylor Swift song, and Steve and Mark discuss where song structure might be headed in the future. We wrap up by talking about Steve's new album, Ghosts, which was recorded live, and Mark's book, new music he's writing, and how this conversation has inspired him. Go to stevedawsonmusic.com or Pravda Records to grab his new album. Follow him at Steve DAWSO on Instagram. Follow Mark Mallman at Mark Mallman on Instagram, TikTok, and X. Follow us at Performance ANX on Instagram and X. And you can grab our merch at performanceanx.threadless.com. Send money for coffee at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. Now get ready to know everything you wanted to know about song structures on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Hello.
Hey, Steve, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's been a while since I had you on, so thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Mark, it's been fairly recently for you, so but thank you both for joining me.
Hi, Steve.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
Does this sound okay?
Yeah.
No. Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah. What T-shirt is that?
This shirt is just
cool.
it's this group of people that I teach.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
They made shirts.
I got one from my old job.
Nice.
Well, actually, it's my current job. We just got bought out by a bigger company.
Okay.
Oh man.
So this is one of the side projects episodes, and I'm gonna credit Steve with this idea because me not being a musician, I never would have thought of this. Song structures. You know, what is a typical song structure, and do songs, popular music especially, need to be crafted in a typical standard song structure, verse, chorus, verse? So when Steve sent that over, Mark, honestly, you're the first person I thought of, and I was like, because of our recent conversation, I'm like, all right, this sounds like it'd be a really interesting conversation between the three of us. More so you two, as I am not a musician and have no idea what the hell we're going to be talking about. So,
I think you probably know more than you think you do, though, because it's not. You don't have to be a musician to understand what the pieces of a song do, and like how they affect you emotionally, and how they, build excitement or build to a specific section. So,
all right. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Cool.
So so typically I do a buttload of research and try to find little details and interesting things to talk about. And I started to do that with this episode and got so bogged down in all kinds of stuff. I'm like, you know what? I've got a few notes, but I'm just going to let it ride, and we'll see where it goes. So, this will either be amazing or a train wreck, and either way, it'll be interesting.
The first step, I think, is a definition of terms. Like, what is a verse? What's a chorus?
Please, that was actually
What's
one of the
bridge?
first thing I was going to ask. Yeah.
Well, I think they're fluid terms, although verses are pretty clear, I guess. I don't know, Mark, what would you say?
I think for the sake of this conversation, Steve, it makes sense to just be on the same page about that. You know, I mean, I'm a songwriter for my job, so I think we should just probably go in this discussion with just the colloquial idea of a verse, a chorus, a bridge, a turnaround, just the basic terms, because if we start, what is a verse is a pretty abstract idea, it's like, especially if you get to like, I don't know, to cite an old song like Wreck of the Edmunds Fitzgerald. If there is no chorus, then is the verse, you know what I mean? And then we just go down this rabbit hole. It's a different conversation.
That's exactly the problem I was having researching this.
Well, I would say the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald is all verses. I don't think there's no chorus, there's no refrain, there's no repeating anything other than music, melody, and chords. So that's a really old folk tradition that goes back to like Barbara Allen and all those old Gaelic folk songs where it's just storytelling to a melody.
Yeah, and then if you get a song like Happy Birthday, which it has a long tradition too,
right?
But that's all chorus, right?
Yes.
So, but when we're talking about a pop song or a rock song, the most common format that we're talking about is verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, repeat.
Right? Yes, right.
Okay.
So a verse sets things, like the first verse sets things up, sort of like introduces a lot of elements, introduces the key, the feel, the basic chord sequence, the vocals introduced, the basic premise of the song, or the key, maybe not key, but some images or some thoughts to sort of bring a listener in and sort of give a clue as to what's going to happen in this song.
Okay. We're talking about what's currently basically standard structure of a pop song. So is there a known origin of this structure, verse, chorus, verse, in popular music, or is it really hard to find?
It's a good question.
Yeah, that you'd have to talk to a musicologist on that one. I mean, I would say like I wouldn't even know where to start on that. Lyrics coming from. Well, you'd have to break it down, I guess, lyrically, because are you talking about a lyric chorus or a melodic chorus? Mm-hmm. In classical music, you have themes that repeat and repeat and return, which may be like the beginnings of an idea of a full chorus. And then lyrically, I would say it would go, if you start, I always say like that the beginning of the song lyric starts with Sappho, the Greek poet, that you're creating a song or a lyric, quote unquote, that you pass down from generation to generation for the sake of preserving history and preserving stories, right? Or telling stories. Mm-hmm. So if you're telling a story, I don't know where the chorus fits in on traditional folk songs.
Well, it's usually some kind of a rallying cry or a summation. Some of those folk songs, though, they're super kind of surreal. Like the verses can be about, I'm going to get a pony and ride, and then the chorus is about, I've got this great hat, So they can be super weird. And actually Bob Dylan talks about that I think in Chronicles, just how he was informed by all these surreal old folk songs. But they do have catchy choruses. Mm-hmm. And then the verses, they have what they sometimes called floating verses, where everyone knows the chorus, but people make up the verses sort of as they go. So it's like, you're like, you take a verse. They'll sing something within the pattern, and then everyone rallies back on the chorus. So it's a community thing where people can sing along and join in, I guess. In the folk tradition, that's the origin of a chorus.
Which would make sense because of the word chorus.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That would make sense where the word chorus would come from. Now the chorus sings the refrain. Now Billy's going to tell what happened on the farm today. Now the whole family's going to sing the refrain. Now Johnny's going to tell us what happened on the farm. The old goat died.
Exactly.
Always something dying.
When capitalism comes in is when music is commodified, barely starting and publishing, but really at the dawn of the vinyl is when the rules that we're talking about really come into play,
Okay.
Solid, rigid rules that are formulaic and repeated and repeated and repeated, even to the point like song formats in the 50s where you can't even tell songs apart, everything's very strict. from the dawn because money's involved. And now I think that's where it gets interesting. And that's where you can't break down the how and the why unless there's some defined rules, and the rules become really clear once the the 45 comes out.
Recordings, yeah. And I also heard, I can't remember if it was Smokey Robinson or someone who wrote songs in the 60s saying like, yeah, that you had to have the title in the chorus and repeat it often so that the kids could go to the record store and say like, I want to buy that song called My Girl, I just heard it on the radio. So like they could hear it once, know the title, and know to go ask for it. Oh. So talk about there's capitalism.
That
right?
makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I used to do. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so a song like Journey's Don't Stop Believin' almost flies in the face of that because Don't Stop Believin' isn't the chorus.
Well, that song has a really interesting form. And the fact that it's this massive, massive popular hit is really interesting because it does wait till the very end to give you that big hook.
Right.
And I don't know what you'd call that section. I don't know what you call the ending. Is it a coda? I mean, that song is so full of hooks.
I think what I always say that makes the most sense with that song, it's such a great thing that you brought that song up because it is an anomaly and it blows people's mind. I think it is a chorus. It's just a chorus that happens once because it has all the elements that music has defined as a chorus. Like you were saying, it repeats the title over and over and over. And it just but because when you tell people, and when I found out that the chorus, quote, the chorus only happens once, I had to listen to it. I'm like, really? It doesn't seem like, but it does only happen once. It's perfect. It's a perfect song. It's perfect.
It builds and builds. So the strangers part, maybe that's a pre-chorus. And maybe it's all building and building to that big moment at the end. Yeah.
What's interesting is, for a classic rock song, if we're talking about that genre, take Stairway to Heaven, and it does follow kind of the same idea. It builds and builds and builds.
I guess,
it's masterfully written, even though nobody really knows what it's about. And even Robert, Plant says it's not about much. And but it doesn't have a chorus. There's no chorus to it. So I think that what you're talking about when you point out Don't Stop Believing versus when you put it next to Stairway to Heaven, you realize that there is a definite set of circumstances that happen in a chorus. The title repeating for the most part.
And the other thing, since you mentioned Stairway to Heaven, and we're talking a little bit about song structure, is that song speeds up as it goes. The tempo changes, which isn't typical for your average pop song.
That song is so unique, though. It's almost like a prog song or something.
Totally.
It's even unique for them. Like they didn't have a lot of songs like that. That's these big suites of where things change.
A friend of mine invited me to see Zardoz last night, and I did not go. I have seen it one time. It's a dreadful Sean Connery film with a huge budget science fiction film and
a very skimpy mankini.
You've seen it then.
Yes.
It's so weird. And I bring this up a couple weeks ago. I was reading an interview with someone who worked on Star Wars, and they were saying the studio was afraid of this movie, Star Wars, because it was so weird to the studio. And now we look back and we think, oh, Star Wars is just so generic, but it defined a genre of space opera. So it doesn't seem weird at all.
Yeah.
If Zardoz would have defined a genre of adult space, then we would look at Star Wars and we would think, oh, that's totally weird. And I think why I say that is because if a song like Stairway to Heaven is a complete weird anomaly for a song for that time period, but it just became Star Wars because it went from weird to unique, it just stands out, and then it can just stand out, and it's like Under Pressure is that way too. It's like, what is that?
Oh, so weird. Yeah. So weird.
I think for me, it's like one of the best bridges I think has ever been written in a song from that time period. But what is it?
So if it's done well, it works. But I'm sure there are countless examples of people trying to do it and it failing miserably.
Like trying to have kind of free-form structures like that?
Yeah, so like Don't Stop Believin', Under Pressure, Stairway to Heaven, and doing something that's not your typical verse, chorus, verse. And having
another one is Thunder Road, the Springsteen song.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
That one sort of starts in one place and just travels and travels and builds to the big sort of saxophone coda, but there's no chorus in that song.
Oh, Thunder Road. Oh,
yeah, he does say that. Maybe that's a chorus.
I don't know. No, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, Springsteen really is anthemic in that he'll state his narrative and then he will do what we're talking about. He'll reinforce the theme by shouting the title. Born in the USA is a great example of
right.
Yeah.
But I think when you said if it's good, if it's a failure or success, I think that only applies to the capitalist sense of it. Like because there are plenty of songs that are incredibly written that don't become hits because they would fail as a radio song. So we can't really say that. I mean, and then there are songs that I don't even know if it's proper to say if a song is good or bad. We're just so inundated by this idea that we're supposed to judge songs by how long it stayed at number one or how many records it sold. Those are two different things. But
well, right, because if a song speaks to somebody, then it's a success, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Which is hard when you're trying to catalog, classify, and critique music and put it in order and set it within the context of society. It's so incredibly subjective that criticism really is a moot point. But the brain doesn't want to accept that. I think a tune that we're talking about, classic rock, a tune that really is archetypal. I think great example of like verses and chorus is Penny Lane. I just think. One thing I think a great song title does is says the title of the song in the very, very beginning. So it's the first lyric.
Yeah.
Penny Lane. And he's just saying the title, but it's not the chorus. But he is saying Penny Lane.
That is a brilliantly constructed song.
Money by Pink Floyd does the same thing. Because I don't think there's a chorus in that, right?
Yeah.
No. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you call that kind of song but it's a really common thing where you say, you kind of repeat. Dylan does it in that song. It's not dark yet. You know, it's like what do you call that? Like a refrain, maybe?
I would call that a refrain. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then there's a couple of, I looked up popular songs without choruses, and the first ones that come up are Bohemian Rhapsody, El Paso by Marty Robbins, Happiness is a Warm Gun by the Beatles, Stardust, Nat King Cole, Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones, Pinball Wizard by The Who, and Losing My Religion by R.E.M. Those are the top ones that come up.
Interesting.
And Losing My Religion has a chorus.
Okay.
Definitely. I'm gonna look at those lyrics though.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff repeated in that song. I don't know what part of it. That's me and I.
Yeah.
But Bohemian Rhapsody is another one of those kind of almost proggy songs that we're talking about that just has all these parts and develops, and those songs, like The Who has those kind of songs too, like those big epic.
It succeeds because it's a successful narrative. Like Bohemian Rhapsody succeeds is because every second of the song is great.
Yes.
So if you make something that's that great, it doesn't need to have doesn't need to follow any rules at all. You know, it's just so that is something you can get away with not following the formula for if you happen to be one in a billion people.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like to write a song like that doesn't have a bunch of repeating hooks and to hold someone's interest is really challenging.
Yeah, and that the label was shitting their pants.
Yeah.
The money's flying out the window, and there's like, what? This is an opera song?
What the hell is this thing?
What the hell? Just give us a verse, of course. We need a single, man. We need a single. This is not it.
Yep. That's the famous thing. I don't hear a single.
Man, that song spoke to me. That song, when I was probably 10 when that thing came out, and I heard it on the radio, and it was just like a magical beam. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever heard in my life.
Wow.
And I think I'm not you guys, you would probably know, Steve, am I right that the basic tracks the basic track is a piano. The first track is him playing piano, right?
I think that's right.
And then they built it around that. His time was so good, he counted off that a cappella part in his head.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah, so smart. But if we're talking about, okay, so there's this, when I was in the early 2000s, I was working with this songwriting company, and I had found out Paris Hilton was putting out an album, and I was like, I want to write a song for that. So my agent contacted their management and said, hey, we have an artist that wants to write a song. So I had this song. It was called Cheeky Cheeky Boys, and it was like a hyper pop song. It was way not ready for that thing. But I sent it in, and they said it's not right for this project. But what came out is this song, Stars Are Blind. And it's a generic as hell song. Like in a video game, you'd call it an NPC song, a non-player character song, just a generic. And I think that's a good kind of idea to really discuss, like, format is the most like basic, generic, you could even say Like a Virgin, or just really basic. Like a Virgin's pretty good, but it's not great. You see what I'm saying? Like the real Billie Jean would be an example of a song that's just, there's no bridge there though. I'm trying to think of 80s songs that would be so generic and boring. Billie Jean's not. Iran might be a good one. I don't know if there's a bridge to it, but you have kind of an average song that the label's going to hear and be like, well, this is the single, and everybody agrees this is the single, and we put it out, and it goes kind of far on the charts, even though it's a haircut that sold that song. Another thing we have to remember when we think about songwriting that people forget is a lot of time a song is a part of a thing. So we think like, well, why did Iran get so popular? And it's like because of the guy's haircut. Like, yeah, it's a good song, but his haircut, or the Adam Ant songs. You're like, well, what? Yeah. These are great songs. Goody Two Shoes is a great song, but what distinguished it from other singles that were released? Well, you have this dude dressed in like a pirate. Somebody might argue the pirate thing, but I think sometimes we forget once a song becomes cemented in popular culture and it does go to number one and it does make a lot of money, and we look back at the song and we think, wow, that was a great song. Well, was it great or was it just successful? Was it great or was it just catchy? Was it great or was it just a haircut?
Well, right. Those songs were the early years of MTV, so videos were making a big difference.
Yeah. And I think the way we tell it is, I've always said to myself, I've always said this thing where it's like, an album should not be reviewed until it's out for 10 years, because then the trend is gone and the context is gone, and you can see how it impacted society. Because you hear about like the Abbey Road review, the Rolling Stone Abbey Road review. It was 2.5 stars.
Right?
Like,
really?
Yeah.
The writer was mostly upset because there was a moog in it, or famous Pitchfork 1.9 star review of Tool's Lateralis, where you're just like, what, 1.9 out of 10 for this Tool album? I think you're wrong. But I think when we look back, one way to say, well, is it quote unquote good? Was it a good verse and chorus? Do we remember? Is it still around?
So Steve, I've got a question for you. So not looking or going, I guess maybe going back to the first chorus verse format, would it be fair to say that Leadville from your new album doesn't have the typical format?
Zeppelin and Skinner blasting out distorted from the Tandy speaker in a pickup truck. Standing around a bonfire, no one saying nothing, till a fight broke out or the sheriff showed up.
Yeah, it's just verses. Yeah. There's no chorus. Just verses.
That's one of my favorites off the new album. It's such a great story in that whole song. I love it. But that's one of the things that struck me when I was listening to it on the way home today, and I was just like, wait, there's one? Like,
I actually have a bunch of songs that don't have choruses. I didn't even realize it until I was doing a thing like this. I can't remember the situation, but I was like, oh yeah, and then I was like, oh geez, I guess I do have a lot of songs that don't have choruses. I never thought about it.
Are those label records, or are you putting them out?
Well, it's with a little indie label in Chicago called Pravda.
Oh, I know Pravda.
Yeah.
So I think that the thing about songwriting, when it's an art form and we're not on a major label, or we're not pushed to have a single, I think you find that a lot of songs don't follow this format that we kind of have believed into our brain that needs to be there, you know?
Yeah, and there's songs that start with the chorus, you know, like "Shout" by Tears for Fears.
I love songs that start with the chorus. If it's a great chorus, you know, it's like, why waste any time? Just go right to it.
Yeah, you'd think that would be the way that labels would have pushed this whole thing.
Right.
To start with the chorus. It's weird that we have it not actually first.
Well, there's the whole building up of anticipation thing. So you get the slow build from intro, verse, pre-chorus, and then the chorus hits, and you get that burst of excitement. But it is nice when you get a song that just has a really great chorus right off the top.
Oh yeah.
I wonder if it has something to do with radio, like how systemically the radio would be. Like maybe it just didn't work. I mean, this is really just kind of riffing here, but if you have two choruses, heavy choruses, like bumping into each other, maybe it's just there's no break there.
Too much.
You're going from one song to the next song, and you have this loud chorus, and you go to another loud chorus. I don't know. Well, there's got to be a reason why it hasn't evolved to start with the chorus. I never thought about it, but it just makes sense.
Well, do you think that will be changing? Because I know with streaming services, I don't know who the they is that I'm talking about. I've heard that, I guess maybe the streaming services want artists to hit the chorus within the first 30 seconds. They
definitely want things shorter.
Yeah. So
it's a return to the late 50s when he wants your song to be 2 minutes long.
Right. And you hit that chorus right away. There's I shouldn't say no build, but everything comes a lot faster.
Maybe we should look at Taylor Swift songs, and she's on top of the world.
Ugh.
Does she ever have bridges in her songs?
Oh yeah. For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of them do.
Okay.
And they're great.
No, I haven't heard one in a long time. My kids kind of outgrew her, so I don't have to be subjected to it anymore.
She would have been great in the advertising world, and instead she just wrote advertisements for herself. I just feel like Taylor Swift songs are just jingles for Taylor Swift. And they're fun. They're great.
They're catchy.
There you go. They're catchy and well written, but they move me about as much as a hamburger commercial does. I hear it once or twice and I'm like, wow, that's really great. Intellectually, my left brain completely says that is great. I'm going to go listen to Joy Division.
I'm looking at a lead sheet for I Knew You Were Trouble. So it has first verse, big chorus, second verse, repeat of the big chorus, and then a really pulled back in the dynamics, very short bridge that doesn't introduce any new chords, but it puts them in a different order. Mm-hmm. And then it just pulls down just for probably 30 seconds and then blasts back into the chorus.
Yeah. Shake It Off has this kind of rap section.
Right.
What about Bad Blood lyrics. Okay. We got Baby Got Bad. Okay. This song starts with the chorus, actually. Bad Blood starts with the chorus. And then we got this thing about Katy Perry, and then we got some more Baby, we got Bad Blood in this chorus. And yes, there's a bridge. Her bridges are weird. The weirdest bridges, I think, are Red Hot Chili Peppers bridges. She goes into this thing, Band-Aids don't fix bullet holes. It seems like a Rolling Stone writer once told me the bridge is the conscience of the song.
Ooh, wow.
I love that. The bridge is the devil's advocate of the song.
I like that.
Yeah. And it seems like Taylor Swift bridges, from what I'm familiar with, mostly his 89 Reputation era, is she tends to always move a little bit R&B in the bridge. And, that's just my experience from that. I'm not a Taylor expert.
Yeah, me neither. But I was just thinking, because she's just wildly popular and has been for quite a while, she must have something figured out in terms of using structure to her advantage.
Yeah, if you hear that song she wrote in 9th grade, it's amazing. Like I wasn't writing songs that good in ninth grade.
She wrote a song in ninth grade. Jeez.
So she's using really traditional song structures. She's not really taking any chances.
I mean, if you want to sell billions and billions of hamburgers, you make the McDonald's hamburger, very basic, plain, and it appeals to a lot of people. That's how you sell the most songs. And I think that's what labels are concerned with. You know, when you're talking about the dawn of streaming and death of radio stations, you have two things that dictate popular music. You have capitalism and you have technology. Technology has power over capitalism all the time. And then capitalism is next. So the technology, I have this theory that the chorus is just going to go away. That's my theory, that the chorus is we're just moving towards non-linear music.
That's just groove based and with a few chants here and there, a few like hook lines thrown out.
I think so. That's just vibe based.
Interesting.
I don't know if the chorus is going to be necessary when you don't need to sell music anymore.
I do notice like, Phoebe Bridgers' Kyoto song that has what seems to be a chorus, but the second time it comes around, the lyrics are completely different. So it feels like a chorus. And I think she'd probably say it is, but the words are entirely different.
And I think with Phoebe Bridgers, like, you can break rules when you're that good. Like, if you're that good of a songwriter, you can break it, because really the only thing that really matters to the fans, if you can get past the label, is was it good every single second along the way.
Right.
You know, and if she wasn't as good, she might have to go back on, lean on some things.
Right. They might say, well, your chorus, you need to have your chorus be more consistent or people aren't going to buy this, but...
Right.
You know. Yeah.
But, and you know, she starts indie, and when you start indie, you know, when you start like Modest Mouse, you start indie, and then you define, or Sonic Youth, you define yourself as indie. Then when you do sign to a major, you've already set the standard.
True. Yes.
But when you start on a major, you're locked in, you know, you're Mandy Moore, you gotta, well, that's different. She's great. But yeah. So I think so much of what we call songwriting is entertainment based on formulas that someone else set up. And I like working under restrictions. I like writing I like trying to get to the chorus by 30 seconds.
Sure. Yeah.
Penny Lane does. I'm going to see when the Penny Lane chorus.
So sometimes this structure can help you be more creative than instead of just being the same old.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, constraints can actually help you. Otherwise, it's like, you know, the blank page or just like open space can be terrifying. It's like, what do I do?
And you're just writing Mountain Jam by Allman Brothers all day long.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can't really break any rules if there aren't rules, you know?
That's true.
That's a really good point.
You know, you can't go against the system. Is this too loud? Is that loud?
I don't even hear it.
Okay, so second verse, here we go. 27, 28, 29, 30. He missed the mark. 31, 32, 33 seconds. Paul. But I think there's 2 verses before he gets to it on Penny Lane. But Spotify wouldn't put that on a playlist, that piece of crap song.
Yeah, but you think by that point, the Beatles were on top of the world. They could literally do anything. Like their first singles, like I Want to Hold Your Hand. I wonder how soon the chorus comes in on that. It's probably very early in the song.
Well, and She Loves You, it's immediate. It's the first thing.
It's the first thing you hear, right? Right out of the...
The Beatles are like the Taylor Swift of their era.
You can't have Day in the Life. You can't have a label letting you record or release Day in the Life unless you were a boy band in the beginning. And I always thought with the Jonas Brothers, I was like, okay, the Jonas Brothers is going to be the Beatles because they're starting off, they're a boy band-ish kind of thing, and they're doing these really straight pop songs. And next thing they're going to do is like this crazy, innovative stuff. And they do. They're geniuses. But it didn't go the route of the Beatles. But, you know, it is one of these things where like, the Beatles, even if who wrote Day in the Life?
I think John Lennon.
Yeah.
It's Paul. It's got to be Paul John.
John wrote the verses and Paul wrote the bridge. The woke up, got out of bed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
That's
For
McCartney.
sure. Right? The
Yeah.
English Army, that line is definitely Lennon. But Penny Lane has got to be all Paul.
I think so, yeah.
But, the label isn't going to allow that song in the beginning. With
Oh, no
new band.
chance.
No, you're
Yeah.
not going to let it. So part of, again, what makes a song a hit and a success has to do with the artist in particular, where they are in their career and how much faith the label has in them.
right.
I feel like there's so much to discuss on this. I hope we don't
Yeah.
have to wrap too soon.
One thought I had that was very interesting is that these things that we're talking about, verse, chorus, bridge, are old by music development stage. These are things that, like, rules that were built in the 50s and 60s, and we're still kind of following those same rules, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because the formats haven't changed really, and ownership of the method of delivery hasn't really changed until Spotify and the streaming services. So I guess in the industry, they never really felt the need to change anything because it was working.
And I guess things like what we were talking about earlier, the Stairway to Heaven and Bohemian Rhapsody, those were attempts to sort of obliterate the norms.
Oh, for sure.
And they were successful, but they didn't become the norm. It's like it wasn't like pop music then became Stairway to Heaven, that everyone was going to do that. We're all going to write massive epic suites now.
Right.
No. And if you would look at the charts, that was the anomaly. But you did have I think it happens when you have a movement within your culture that is bigger than the format of verse, chorus. So prog rock and album rock, it could have been the invention of the album that brought this type of weird song into the mix.
Right.
Because they're like, well, we're making a concept album, and the label's like, okay, this band is huge, and they're making a concept album. I guess we're going to make Welcome to the Machine a single. Okay.
We have not discussed Rush, but they would definitely fit into this category of like, we're just going to have these epic things that just go from here to here.
And I mean, Relayer is 3 songs and it's an entire album.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you don't know I don't know the backstory of those records. I don't know if the label did push them. And there's a ton of singles on The Wall and 0 singles on Animals.
Very
and there's not really a single on Airplane Over the Sea. And they're on the Black Parade, Teenagers is like almost a parody of singles. So I think when you do talk about a concept album, I think that it doesn't need to have a single, and it doesn't make sense in the context of a concept record. All of a sudden the single's in there and you're like, what the hell's this?
I guess with concept albums, I mean, I would imagine it depends on the band, because if you've got a band that's Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd, guaranteed to sell millions of albums, are they worried about singles and just let them do what they want? And then up and coming, all right, now you got to make up for it with the other bands, because
I wonder, like you mentioned that Neutral Milk Hotel record, that might be one of the last records where everyone I knew listened to the whole record.
Yeah, you listen to the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's a one deal.
I don't know that people do that anymore. Maybe some do, but I think most people listen song to song now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I listen to entire albums because I have artists like you guys on the show. So I love the album format. So, when I get an album, I listen to the whole thing, the way you guys sequence it and everything. So,
I love that. Oh, sorry.
No. I was just going to say it's commercially and technologically driven, the album format. I love the album format. I think it's great. But does it? I don't really know how it applies right now.
Well, I think it varies. I mean, and obviously it's always varied, but so Steve, since we're on the topic, your new album Ghosts, Is there a theme that runs through it? Because I think that's one thing that is important if you're going to listen to an album is, you know, some albums you can definitely feel a theme going through them all, and it makes sense to listen to it front to back.
Right, and if it's conceived that way, then you get some. It's almost like watching a movie or reading a book, where you by the end you have this hopefully greater understanding, or you've gone through some kind of journey emotionally, or
Right. So
I try to do that in all the records I make, because that's my favorite records growing up were the ones that did that, where I'd get to the end of the record and just go like, wow. So it was
What records would you say did that to you, Steve?
Oh gosh. I think, well, the first one I remember is the White Album, which I don't know if that was even meant to be a concept album, but I remember listening to that as a kid and just being like, holy mackerel.
It's weird how that album feels like a concept album, and it's so disjointed.
Yes, isn't it though?
Yes.
I love how disjointed it is. I love the chaos of it. But like Stevie Wonder records do that to me, where those early classic like Intervisions, you get to the end and you're just like, oh my God.
It's a weird concept record, because the songs all fit together. Some of them fade into each other.
Yeah.
The city, right, fades into the city, or the city fades.
I can't remember, but yeah. Well, how about you? Or what are records that worked for you from top to bottom?
As a composer, when I was young, I had to play stupid classical music. I didn't like it, and I didn't understand it, and I just played it and verbatim and recited it, and I was done. I went on my bike outside. And then I got older, and I started writing rock songs, and I played rock songs, and that worked because I was touring, and I was, doing the whole thing. And then once I started composing and touring less, and having clients coming up to me and say, make this kind of music. We need something that's orchestral. We need country music. And then having to learn all these styles, and then having to score a picture, and then suddenly like having to live up to this title, composer, which is not like, people think it's like composing for symphony, but it just means you're, writing for TV or writing for picture. Something happened when I was 35, I'm 50 now, 35, 36 years old, where suddenly I could listen to a piece of music like it was watching a movie. So I could sit down, I could listen to Beethoven's Fifth, and all of a sudden I could just sit there and I got it. I think it was because I had been beaten down and put through the fucking grinder on how all the sides of music, So I have around that, like, breakthrough time for me allowed me to like sit down and just listen to a modern jazz quartet record cover to cover and be blown away with like Bitches Brew, be blown away by the end of it. And it's not like I listened to the White Album. The White Album for me is I agree with you. That's like, it's perfect. I love it, but I think pieces of music that are just less driven and informed by capitalism, less informed by radio and haircuts. To me now, a piece of Mahler music, or, a Cronus Quartet album, an Ornette Coleman science fiction album, I can I feel like those records now take me and make me go, yeah, where I don't really, it can be a refrain, it can be a theme that's repeated, but I don't really care that if you have a chorus or not. But then when it comes to rock and pop records, I feel like for me, the one that gets me really, really hardcore as a songwriter is the Violent Femmes self-titled record. Because you start it and you start singing and you don't ever stop singing. and it's so non-formulaic, but I'm just like, what? I can't stop singing the whole record. That kind of blows my mind. I'm like, why did I just do that? So yeah, but when I was a kid, it was like Beatles and Pink Floyd, these things where I didn't have the musical experience to understand, Ornette Coleman science fiction. Cause I was just starting out. I wasn't smarter or dumber. I just was starting out.
Right. speaking of Ornette Coleman, it does jazz or maybe other forms of music besides pop music. Do they have the same issues, like where song structures are similar, and then people are just trying to break out of them, or are they trying to be more creative within the standard song structure of that genre?
Well, they started out playing tunes. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was the origins of jazz was piano players in New Orleans that had to fill time because they're just sitting there playing, and they're getting sick of playing, the same song. So they're just experimenting and playing around with a tune, but they're still playing tunes.
Okay.
Yeah. And like, let's say you're with a combo and you're all going to do A Train. Then, we start out, we do A Train, we do a round of it, or, Caravan or something. We do a round of it. Okay. All right. Now for the next 48 measures or whatever, our bassist is going to do his thing. And that's sort of similar to Johnny's going to tell us the story of what happened on the farm today. And then the combo is going to get back together. We're going to run through A Train again. And now the piano player is going to tell us what happened on the farm today.
Yeah.
It's really similar to the pop format when you're with a combo.
That's fascinating. I never put those together.
Yeah. And then at the end, they all come together and play the tune again, generally.
Because the root of music, why we like music, is because the brain recognizes a pattern and then the variation on the pattern.
Right.
So you kind of need to have a theme or a chorus or something, for the most part, to distinguish, and then point and counterpoint is kind of what our brain is doing when we're listening to songs.
Totally. I tell songwriting students that our brains are just pattern-seeking devices, and so it's trying to discern, how can I combine these things to make sense of it? So that could be melody, chords, rhythm, lyrics, form. It could be any element that presents a potential pattern. Our brain latches onto it, and if you do too much repetition, then your brain gets bored.
Right.
And too much randomness, then people get lost. Is the two extremes.
Right. There's nothing to latch onto.
And a young songwriter or a student might be, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but might be so used to hearing what the record label or radio is telling you, that they're gonna not trust their intuition on what Steve is saying, and they might think too hard. I need to repeat. But I agree with you, Stevie. The person doesn't need to be all those things in order for it to be good.
Sure.
Just have it. You can have it repeat. But I think sometimes what people think is, I've heard this song and it repeats so much, but it went to number one. Especially in the mid 80s, you got these songs that like half the song is just the chorus repeating for a really long time. I don't know exactly why they happen, but I think sometimes we underestimate listeners, and you're absolutely right. Like, you don't need to repeat something too much, even though your left brain might be saying, no, people will like it if I say it more and more and more. And you have to be like, no, repeat it, but not too much. The people don't like "Don't Worry, Be Happy" because it repeats too much. And it's written by a master, absolute master of singing.
Yeah, right. Agreed.
Yeah. Steve, I was just interested where you think music is headed in relation to verse, chorus, bridge.
Well, I would think more in the direction of that Phoebe Bridgers song that I mentioned, where it still feels like traditional song structures, but that it's pushing the limits of that. So you still get the feeling of that feels like what a chorus should feel like, but it's not necessarily a chorus. It's breaking some rules. And the other thing I'm noticing is bridges that come sooner than expected. And so that if your standard pattern is verse, chorus, bridge, chorus out, you'll get the bridge maybe after the first chorus or something, or it'll go somewhere sideways earlier in the song. So I think that stuff's fun and exciting, and it's not so radically different than that, so that people are going to reject it. I think, anyway, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I mean, if you think of Warhol's concept of pop being an assembly line, and pop music is a form of that assembly line. You're right. You can't, in order for it to stay in the charts, we're talking about pop music or rock music, whatever, you want it to stay in the charts, it can't break too far. I mean, there are anomalies that are always going to stand out, but we never hear about all the singles that don't go anywhere. You know, we only hear about the singles that take off. So I think you're right. Like, as far as hitting critical mass, as long as the labels are in charge, which they're fighting to be in charge, and I think AI is going to really change that.
Yeah.
You can't really, I don't think it's interesting to break the formula entirely either. I think what's more interesting is what you're talking about. I'm going to like what, you know, if it bends, it's funny. If it breaks, it's not funny. I'm going to push the envelope of the bridge.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to just go. I think Big Thief does that too a lot.
Yeah. Right.
It's awesome.
She totally does that.
She's so great.
Well, I was just thinking,
and she's a shredder, man.
one of the songs that, since we're talking about that, like no choruses, this whole entire time I'm thinking, all right, I know there's a song that I really like and I remembered what it was. It was When I Grew Up by Fever Ray.
Okay.
So if you guys are familiar with Fever Ray, there's no chorus in it. It's just like Edmunds, Fitzgerald. It just tells a story. There's no chorus at all. And it just ends on this really, what repeats is the instrumental passage at the end, kind of like Don't Stop Believin' with Journey. It's this really catchy, but it's an instrumental piece. And I think that's the song structure for that song is really interesting.
I'm not familiar with that song. So
Yeah, I'm not either. But.
Oh, I'll have to send it to you. And if you look at the video just is amazing. It goes back to 80s MTV where the visual is just as stunning as and arresting as the song. And Fever Ray is just a wild artist. It's just amazing. All right, so Steve, I know you have a new album. I want to talk to you a little bit about that before we have to wrap everything up. So Ghosts, we were talking about albums with themes. Is there a theme to it? Because here it's a little more in the country vein from your last album. And
that's true.
I hear the repetition from what I was hearing the past few days of listening to it is a lot of drinking going on, some regrets.
Yeah. There's definitely some alcoholism in that record. Yeah. It's sort of like a lot of the ghosts are memories from the past that, you know, try to live in the moment, try to be grateful, but those past things from the past keep showing up. So it's like, that's kind of like the struggle, the internal struggle of the record, I guess.
You know, that's definitely evident in Leadville, which is one of the highlights for me. That's a great song.
Oh, thank you.
And I forgot my track listing on a different computer here for some reason. So I'm gonna be looking like this for a second here. Don't mind my awkward posture. But I think my favorite on the album is When I Finally Let You Down.
For my New Year's resolution, I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna keep drinking until I can hardly see. Then I'm coming home to you. If I pass out on your stairs, if I shatter your life.
Oh, yeah.
The last two tracks in the album are amazing. And
thanks.
Weather in the Desert, the way it ends with the drummer going absolutely bonkers.
I know. He's so great.
Those two songs are just fantastic. And
thanks.
It's a really great album. And like I said, it's a little different from the last album, which was the last time I had you on. I got to get you on a little more often. At the Bottom of a Canyon in the Branches of a Tree, which I love that album. So,
thanks.
Was there a reason you kind of decided to turn a little bit more into the country sound?
Well, yeah, a lot of that is because I got Brian Wilkie, this pedal steel player. I've always wanted to record with him. So a lot of that is just because there's pedal steel on it, I think. The previous record I did, it was like a pandemic record where I played all the parts myself, you know, in my home studio. So everything was layered. This record was all recorded live in the studio with, musicians all gathered around in a circle.
Oh, man.
The experience of making it was completely different. And that was intentional. And I hired a lot of my favorite musicians. The drummer you're talking about is Gerald Dowd, who's in like 47 bands in Chicago. He's like the most in-demand drummer in town, but for good reason. He's phenomenal and he's great to work with. And I don't know, maybe it has more of an Americana-ish thing because it was recorded all live, and I sang live, and I don't know. I can't answer that exactly because it still was.
It was more organic than a concrete decision to go that route.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, the album is great. I just love the way you ended it. Like a mile south of town. That's just an amazing story. The storytelling that you're able to do in this album is just beautiful.
Thank you.
I rode too fast in the dark again. Didn't even see the white-tailed deer. Now we're lying here in the middle of the road, in the middle of a pitch black night, breathing our last breaths together, not a sound, nobody else around for miles and miles.
And which is why I wanted to know if there was a theme going through the whole thing, because every song just tells a story. There's no,
There is definitely storytelling. Like that song you're talking about is just 3 verses, no chorus, no bridge, no nothing. It's just 3 verses. It's like very, very old folk song style.
Well, we've come to determine that you don't do a lot of verse chorus.
I guess not.
You discovered that today.
Which is not to say I don't love a good chorus. If I come up with a great chorus, I'm super happy. But it's hard. It's hard to write a super catchy, great chorus,
Oh, I believe it. I don't do it at all. And I can't even imagine trying.
I think one way a couple things on that. Sometimes if I come up with a chorus, the best time is when the chorus, I write that first.
Right.
Sometimes what I find is I'll write the verse and then I'll write the second half of the verse. And then I'm like, okay, that's the chorus actually.
Yeah.
One thing that I learned from listening to Michael Jackson songs that I think is awesome is a lot of those tunes, the bass line of the verse repeats under the bass line of the chorus. So I took that trick and I do that all the time in my songs.
So the bass line is the same, but the chords are different?
No, like listen to Billie Jean. The bass line in the verse of Billie Jean is the same as the bass line in the chorus of Billie Jean.
Okay. And he just notches up the melody.
The melody changed. Yeah, he's totally like always, 1, and then I'm going to move it to 5, and then I'm going to octave up for the chorus. Yeah. But I'm on the tonic,
Yeah.
Master of choruses.
Oh my God.
In my opinion.
Apparently I don't know if he wrote that song. I don't know which ones he actually wrote, but apparently he would sing all the parts because he didn't play anything. He would sing.
I've heard that.
Which is a great way to write pop songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he'd say here's the keyboard part, here's the bass part, here's what I'm hearing the drums doing.
It was successful for him for sure.
Oh, those songs are masterpieces.
Yeah, they're killer.
They don't call him the king of pop for nothing.
Right.
So, Mark, I know we just had you on not too long ago. What have you got going on recently?
Oh, I recently I've been editing my new book for my agent, which is a book about love songs. And then I do this conversation is great because I do have this tune that another tune with the label and I are kind of working on this record organically, like it's done, but now we're kind of listening to it on this SoundCloud space, and we're like, well, maybe we should take that song out. And I've got these non-single songs, and I've already got 10 albums, and they all are non-single songs. They have non-single songs on them too. I usually put 3 or 4 singles because we got to have shit to play on the road.
Right.
And, but I'm going to actually going to do the Abbey Road thing with these non-single songs, and tonight I'm gonna go into the computer and figure out how I can smash these songs into each other.
Nice.
And maybe there are 3 songs, and I might combine them both into one song that has a part 1 and a part 2, and then go into Logic and make some like slow tempo transitions, maybe key changes. So basically what I'm doing is I'm taking 3 non-single songs and making a prog album out of them. And if my label's listening right now, they're not going to be happy with it, but they got the damn singles, so it's fine. But that is something you think about, like once you have like 10 albums, you're writing another album, you're like, am I writing a new album or am I writing the same album I already wrote? And your brain is like, no, this is so good. And you're like, yeah, but that song, you're singing about the same subject matter. It's in the same key as you did in 2005, Mark. And you have to be like, okay, yeah, I got to change. Bowie was always changing.
Yes.
You know,
he was.
So that's what I'm going to do tonight. Embrace change and tell my ego mean things.
Hey. Sometimes you got to kick your ego in the ass. This has been wild. I think I learned a lot. I'm going to have to go back and listen to it to make sure I've digested this. But is there anything that we've missed? I know we could probably go on and on with this topic for hours, but is there anything that we've missed that you guys want to get out before I start asking you guys your social media information?
No, I think it was a cool conversation. It went in a lot of different directions, and yeah, it is true. I mean, you could have this as a starting point, and a conversation could
this could be a podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, well, Steve, I want to thank you for the idea because you're the one that brought this to the table, and I think it's been fascinating. Like I said, I went down a rabbit hole trying to prepare for this, and I at one point just said, "Screw it! I'm just going to get these 2 guys on, and we're going to just talk, and I'm going to kind of step back and listen." So it worked out for me this time.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out when I'm like, hey, I'm the host and I'm going to step back and listen. But so, Steve, where can people find the new album? When's it due to be released? And how can they follow you to find out what you're up to?
It comes out June 7th. And then it'll be everywhere streaming. My website is stevedawsonmusic.com, and that has links to everything. I'm on all the social media places. There's links there to those. There's a new single. Well, I don't know when this will air. There's a new single that comes out this coming Friday.
Oh, it'll be after that.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah,
it'll be the old single at that point. Mark, what about you? Where can people follow what you're up to?
The usual places: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and my book is out, and the first one is out. You can get that on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble, and pretty easy to track down. So Mark Mallman.
Like I said, this has been really interesting. I've been fascinated to just hear the 2 of you guys talk about different songs and bringing up things that I didn't even think of, like Wreck of the Edmunds Fitzgerald. I love that song, and I never ever thought about it not having a chorus. So this is just...
Yeah, listen to it with that in mind now. It'll freak you out. It'll freak you out that I mean, that's a pretty incredible songwriting, because it's just, he holds your interest, and there's not even a lot of real, like, traditional rhyming in there. It's a lot of just ing words.
Right.
It's fascinating. No, it's a real amazing piece of work.
It really is.
Yeah. Well, you know what I want to say real quick?
Yeah.
You know what an amazing piece of work is? It's a song called Chocolate Rain. It is amazing. And it is totally amazing. A completely underrated song. If you just look at the lyrics, just read the lyrics, you'll be like, well, this is like Bob Dylan level songwriting. I just think it's I want to champion that song my whole life. It's a completely underrated song that was just like written by someone who was just writing at home, and they blew up online for reasons that, but this is a song about systemic racism from a person who is getting their master's at a university.
Wow. I didn't know that.
It's an amazing song.
I have to admit, I've never paid that much attention to it. I know the song, but I'm going to have to go and look it up now.
Go read the lyrics, and you'll be like,
yeah, me too. Yeah.
It's so good.
Well, I'll throw out one more song that I don't think has a chorus. Now that I think about it, it's one of my favorites, and it goes back to the telling a story where an entire album tells a story. Days of Graduation by Drive-By Truckers. I absolutely love that song, and it's an incredible start to that Southern rock opera album, which they're touring this summer. It's like the 20th anniversary of the album, I think.
Oh, wow. Crazy.
So, well, guys, thank you so much. I do appreciate your time so much. It means so much for you that when guests come back on and are willing to talk about a whole nother topic, it means a lot to me.
Well, thanks for doing it. All right. Nice to meet you, Mark.
Nice to meet you guys. Have a great night.